Good morning. If you have a Bible handy, turn with me to Second Chronicles 29. Second Chronicles 29. We've been reading through the Old Testament together as a congregation of people, and we've been doing sermons and lessons based on those readings. And at this juncture of our reading, we are in the kingship of Hezekiah, king of Judah, one of the most prominent kings of God's people in the Old Testament period. And he is a reformer, a restorer of the way of God after years of neglect under Ahaz, his father. And so Second Chronicles 29, verses 1 and 2 says, Hezekiah began to reign when he was 25 years old, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abijah, the daughter of Zechariah. And he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, according to all that David, his father, had done. And so of the 19 kings of Judah, 20 rulers in all, 8 were considered good kings, and most of those kings were good with a huge asterisk at best. Hezekiah was the real deal. I would say that Hezekiah and Josiah, that Solomon had alluded to a few minutes ago at the Lord's Supper talk, both were worthy of the moniker good. Verses 3 through 11 continues. In the first year of his reign, in the first month, he opened the door of the house of the Lord and repaired them. He brought in the priests and the Levites and assembled them in the square on the east and said to them, "Hear me, Levites. Now consecrate yourselves. Consecrate the house of the Lord, the God of your fathers, and carry out the filth from this holy place. For our fathers have been unfaithful and have done what was evil in the sight of the Lord our God. They have forsaken him and have turned away their faces from the habitation of the Lord and turned their backs. They also shut the doors of the vestibule and put out the lamps and have not burned incense or offered burnt offerings in the holy place to the God of Israel. Therefore, the wrath of the Lord came on Judah and Jerusalem, and he has made them an object of horror, of astonishment, of hissing, as you see with your own eyes. For behold, our fathers have fallen by the sword. Our sons and our daughters and our wives are in captivity for this. Now it is in my heart to make a covenant with the Lord, the God of Israel, in order that his fierce anger may turn away from us. My sons, do not now be negligent, for the Lord has chosen you to stand in his presence, to minister to him, and to be his ministers, and to make offerings to him. The first order of business in his kingship is to clean up the rubble of the mess that is the temple and to restore order of the worship of the one true and living God. In verses 16 through 19, we continue. The priest went into the inner part of the house of the Lord to cleanse it, and they brought out all the uncleanness that they had found in the temple of the Lord into the court of the house of the Lord. And the Levites took it and carried it out to the brook Kidron. They began to consecrate on the first day of the first month. And on the 8th day of the month, they came to the vestibule of the Lord. Then for 8 days, they consecrated the house of the Lord. And on the 16th day of the first month, they finished. Then they went into Hezekiah the king and said, "We have cleansed all the house of the Lord, the altar of burnt offering, and all its utensils, and the table for the showbread, and all its utensils, all the utensils that King Ahaz discarded in his reign when he was faithless, we have made ready and consecrated, and behold, they are before the altar of the Lord." temple worship was restored. In verses 25 through 30, he stationed the Levites in the house of the Lord with cymbals, harps, and lyres, according to the commandment of David and of Gad the king's seer and of Nathan the prophet, for the commandment was from the Lord through his prophets. The Levites stood with the instruments of David, and the priests with the trumpets. Then Hezekiah commanded that the burnt offering be offered on the altar, and when the burnt offering began, the song to the Lord began also, and the trumpets, accompanied by the instruments of David, king of Israel. The whole assembly worshiped. The singers sang. The trumpeters sounded. All this continued until the burnt offering was finished. When the offering was finished, the king and all who were present with him bowed themselves and worshiped. Hezekiah the king and the officials commanded the Levites to sing praises to the Lord with the words of David and Asaph the seer, and they sang praises with gladness, and they bowed down and worshiped. This all is the first order of business. Highest priority. You become king, we've got to restore the true worship of God and get this temple cleaned up. Eliminate all the idolatrous rubble, get it cleaned up. And then Hezekiah proposes a grand celebration of the Passover, just as Josiah would do later on. If the first month, the first day of the month in which all of this began is not only the first month of Hezekiah's reign, but also the first month of the year, then the Passover would have naturally fallen to the 15th day of the month, the evening after the 14th day of that first month. And they can't get everything cleaned up in time. But they're going to have a Passover in the second month, according to a provisional statute in the law of Moses. So Hezekiah proposes that if we're going to really do this right, we not only need to clean up the temple and consecrate the temple and consecrate the priests, get ourselves right in the head with our worship of God, we need to reinstitute the feast days and the Passover in light of Solomon's comments a few moments ago. Highest order of business, we need to get this going. We need to do it now. And they waste no time. We learn what genuine worship is worth. Worship in English comes from, etymologically, worthship. God is worthy of our adoration, our praise, our thanksgiving, honor and glory due his name. And we learn what genuine worship is worth and how it changes us when we do it right. When we do worship right, it is worth advertising. Not everybody is going to want to get the memo. Some people will downright scoff at it. But if we're doing worship right, it's worth telling the whole world about. Read it with me, chapter 30, verses 1 through 12. Hezekiah sent to all Israel and Judah and wrote letters also to Ephraim and Manasseh, that they should come to the house of the Lord at Jerusalem to keep the Passover to the Lord, the God of Israel. For the king and his princes and all the assembly in Jerusalem had taken counsel to keep the Passover in the second month. For they could not keep it at that time because the priests had not consecrated themselves, in sufficient number, nor had the people assembled in Jerusalem. And the plan seemed right to the king and all the assembly, so they decreed to make a proclamation throughout all Israel, from Beersheba to Dan, that the people should come and keep the Passover of the Lord, the God of Israel, at Jerusalem, for they had not kept it as often as prescribed, which might be the understatement of the year. So couriers went throughout all Israel and Judah with letters from the king and his princes, as the king had commanded, saying, O people of Israel, return to the Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, that he may turn again to the remnant of you who have escaped from the hand of the kings of Assyria. Do not be like your fathers and your brothers, who were faithless to the Lord God of their fathers, so that he made them a desolation. As you see, do not now be stiff-necked as your fathers were, but yield yourselves to the Lord, and come to his sanctuary, which he has consecrated forever, and serve the Lord your God, that his fierce anger may turn away from you. For if you return to the Lord, your brothers and your children will find compassion with their captors and return to this land. For the Lord your God is gracious and merciful, and will not turn away his face from you if you return to him. So the couriers went from city to city throughout the country of Ephraim and Manasseh, and as far as Zebulun. But they laughed them to scorn and mocked them. However, some of the men of Asher and Manasseh and of Zebulun humbled themselves and came to Jerusalem. The hand of God was also on Judah to give them one heart to do what the king and the princes commanded by the word of the Lord. If you're the real deal and your worship to God is genuine, then it's worth talking up. And this is urgent. Numbers 9 through 13 had made a provision for a second chance Passover. If people are not sufficiently cleansed, if they're unclean through ritual defilement the first time around, there was a provision made in the law of Moses in Numbers chapter 9 that if they missed the opportunity to partake of the Passover evening after the 14th day of the first month, then on the second month, the evening after the 14th day of the second month, you could have round two. If they would cleanse themselves sufficiently, you could have a second month Passover for those who missed the opportunity on the first month. The thing is, Hezekiah and the Judahites didn't have opportunity to cleanse the whole shebang on the first month, so the first opportunity for the entire nation was the second month. After years and years of neglect, we can't do this on the first month, 15th day of the month. So we'll gun for the second month, 15th day of the month, and we'll all do it on the second month. And they advertised that. Hezekiah reigns from 716 to 687 BC, 29 years. And northern Israel has gone off to Assyrian captivity in 722 BC, just before he begins his reign proper. And only stragglers remain in northern Israel. The nation of Israel up north has been carried off into Assyrian captivity. But the stragglers that remain have begun to intermingle with other peoples who have been imported into that territory. They've eventually become the Samaritans of the New Testament. And Hezekiah is not going to limit this to southern Judah. He is going to send to those stragglers in northern Israel that there are still a few of you up there that may have a faint memory of 2 centuries ago of coming to Jerusalem and worshiping in the temple of the one true and living God. And I'm inviting all of you who are left to come join us. And of those stragglers that remain, some laughed and mocked. when they received this invitation. This was an opportunity of a lifetime. And when they got it, they laughed at it. They mocked it. We're not going to do that. And the truth of the matter is, not everybody wants to hear about it. Not everybody will appreciate the value of the opportunity when it is presented to them. But here's the thing. And no matter how many times you are mocked for spreading the good news and giving people the invitation of a lifetime, remember these two things. Number one, even though some may mock and laugh, others will humble themselves and listen. And that's why we do this. That's why Hezekiah was doing it. Or the few that would sufficiently humble themselves before God and respond to the invitation. And here's the second thing you need to remember. It doesn't matter if the whole world mocks and the whole world laughs at you. If the hand of God is with you, you're on the right track. If you have the hand of God and a faithful few, you are richly blessed. Even if the world is mocking and laughing. That's worth advertising. But you also have something that is worth cleaning up. We continue in chapter 30 and verse 13. And many people came together in Jerusalem to keep the feast of unleavened bread in the second month, a very great assembly. They set to work and removed the altars that were in Jerusalem and all the altars for burnt offering or burnt incense they took away and threw them into the brook Kidron. They slaughtered the Passover lamb on the 14th day of the second month. And the priests and the Levites were ashamed, so that they consecrated themselves and brought burnt offerings into the house of the Lord. They took their accustomed posts according to the law of Moses, the man of God. The priests threw the blood they received from the hand of the Levites. For there were many in the assembly who had not consecrated themselves. Therefore, the Levites had to slaughter the Passover lamb for everyone who was not clean, to consecrate it to the Lord. For a majority of the people, many of them from Ephraim, Manasseh, Issachar, Zebulun, had not cleansed themselves, yet they ate the Passover otherwise than as prescribed. For Hezekiah had prayed for them, saying, May the good Lord pardon everyone who sets his heart to seek the Lord, the God of his fathers, even though not according to the sanctuary's rules of cleanness. And the Lord heard Hezekiah and healed the people, and the people of Israel who were present at Jerusalem kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days with gladness, and the Levites and the priests praised the Lord day by day, singing with all their might to the Lord. There are some extraordinary things that happen here. First of all, Hezekiah had issued a command for the Levites to consecrate themselves, to get ready for big changes, to be able to be sufficiently pure and holy so that they could do the business of the Lord in his house. And a majority were caught off guard. And you have not enough priests, so the Levites have to help the priests in the sacrificing of these Passover lambs. And then you have all of these northern Israelites who've come down to Jerusalem to worship, and they've just received this invitation. They haven't had time to really think about sufficiently consecrating themselves, and so they're ceremonially, ritually impure. And they come to Jerusalem, they're ready to worship. And the law of Moses contained only two opportunities: the first month, evening after the 14th day of the month, and if round two, second month, 14th day of the month, into the 15th day, and two strikes and you're out. If you're going to look at the law of Moses in terms of technical violation, all of these Israelites who've come to the Jerusalem from the northern Israel are ritually and ceremonially unclean, unfit to partake of this Passover. What should we do? They've all come here in response to this urgent invitation. Should we send them back home because they are in technical violation and this is the last chance? They have heeded the call. They've come to Jerusalem. They're ready to worship. What should we do about this situation? Hezekiah prays that God will forgive them. And the text, this is most amazing. It's most amazing. May the good Lord pardon everyone who sets his heart to seek the Lord, the God of his fathers, even though not according to the sanctuary's rules of cleanness. And the Lord heard Hezekiah and healed the people. I want you to reflect on that for just a moment with me. God is holy, and he is just, and he doesn't mess around. If you know the Old Testament, you know that, there are times when his holiness and his justice will not tolerate any deviations from those who know better. But this is an extraordinary situation. And these people who've been out of duty, out of service, unfaithful for a long, long time suddenly get invited to this thing. They want to worship God. They want to do it right, but they're technically unfit. And Hezekiah says, Lord, essentially, don't know what else to do here, but would you wipe their transgression away this time so that they can stay here and worship? And God does the unthinkable. He grants the mercy of those who were technically in violation. In James chapter 2, 10 through 13, I think we have a commentary on this. For whoever keeps the whole law but fails in one point has become accountable for all of it. For he who said, do not commit adultery, also said, do not murder. If you do not commit adultery but do murder, you become a transgressor of the law. So speak and so act as those who are to be judged under the law of liberty, for judgment is without mercy to one who has shown no mercy. Mercy triumphs over judgment. What does this say about the God that we serve? Hezekiah essentially prays to God, we've got a mess on our hands. We have a bunch of people who've come here to serve you. We're in a pickle. Will you look at the intent of their hearts and forgive their ceremonial uncleanness so they can stay here and worship? And God does what Hezekiah asks. In our morning Bible class this morning in this room, we studied Hezekiah 6 and verse 6 this morning, where God says, for I desire steadfast love and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. The internals are more important to God than the externals. That doesn't mean that externally we can just cast obedience away at will on the basis of the fact, well, my heart's right, I don't need to obey. No, you do need to obey. But there are times when God sees the bigger picture and the intent of the heart trumps something external. That's a difficult concept for me to wrap my mind around. But as Exodus 34, 6 and 7 says that the Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but he will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and the children's children to the third and fourth generation. What God is ultimately looking for in us, he wants obedience, but he wants more. He wants a heart that absolutely wants to do what God says. What does God want from us? He wants us to do justice, to love, steadfast love, and to walk humbly with your God. Micah 6 and verse 8. Like the father of Proverbs 23, verse 26, he's telling all of us, give me your heart. These Israelites were trying to give that to God. And he forgives something that ordinarily might cause us to send some Israelites home packed without the opportunity to serve. And I would just suggest to you that we should think long and hard about that. God's concerned about the externals, but he's more concerned about the internals that lead to the external. It says a lot about God and the God that we serve, whether our heart is right. And one final point, this was a worship that led to serious life changes. In chapter 30, verses 23 through 27, all of those who were worshiping an entire week of Passover and unleavened bread, they were so enthused by what was going on, they decided to keep the feast for another 7 days, verse 23. A 1 week Passover unleavened bread service became a 2 week protracted meeting, if you will, because 1 week wasn't enough. This was so good, they had to extend it to 2 weeks. Overtime, bonus. They wanted more, they couldn't get enough. And then when that was done, when all of that was finished, the 2 weeks were over. Chapter 31, verse 1, when all of this was finished, all Israel who were present went out to the cities of Judah, broke in pieces the pillars, cut down the Asherim, broke down the high places and the altars throughout all Judah and Benjamin and in Ephraim and Manasseh until they had destroyed them all. They worshiped overtime. Their worship caused them to destroy all these false images and idolatry. They recognized their need to put a system in place for lasting good, not just 2 week, one and done, but for lasting good. So Hezekiah appointed the divisions of the priests, of the Levites, division by division that you read about in 1 Chronicles. And he commanded the people to give their portion due to the priests, verse 4 of chapter 31, the Levites, that they might give themselves to the law of the Lord. If these priests are going to be full-time in this, the rest of you need to give and finance it. And they did. And their giving was so abundant. Read it with me, verses 5 through 10. As soon as the command was spread abroad, the people of Israel gave in abundance the first fruits of grain, wine, oil, honey, of all the produce of the field. They brought in abundantly the tithe of everything. The people of Israel and Judah who lived in the cities of Judah also brought in the tithe of cattle and sheep, the tithe of the dedicated things that had been dedicated to the Lord their God, laid them in heaps. And in the 3rd month, they began to pile up the heaps and finished them in the 7th month. Heaps got bigger for 4 months, from the 3rd month to the 7th month. When Hezekiah and the princes came and saw the heaps, they blessed the Lord and his people Israel. And Hezekiah questioned the priests and the Levites about the heaps. Azariah, the chief priest, who was of the house of Zadok, answered him, since they began to bring the contributions to the house of the Lord, we have eaten and have had enough and have plenty left. For the Lord has blessed his people so that we have this large amount left. They didn't give until the need was met and then stopped. They kept giving and giving and giving and giving and giving and giving, and the heaps just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Because if you truly value the worship of the one true and living God, it will change you. And it will cause you to be a force of generosity in this wicked world. And you'll keep giving and giving and giving, and God has a way of keeping on to bless you and bless you and bless you. You will never be able to outgive God. So many lessons. Something worth advertised, something worth cleaning up, something worth serious life changes to make this last for a long, long time. And when Judahites who had come back from captivity had to reinstitute the worship of the one true and living God, rebuild the temple, rebuild respect for the law of Moses, rebuild their lives in the land of promise, they had a good blueprint right here for how that would be done. But we do too. Do you recognize what it cost your forebears in the restoration movement to restore respect for God and respect for genuine New Testament Christianity? And the giving that they did to support preachers of the gospel who would preach the truth in a world filled with error, and the sacrifices that they made to make the legacy that we have possible. True worship changes people. And we have a blueprint for the restoration of God's way right here. It's worth advertising far and wide, even if we get mocked. It's worth cleaning up of all the rubble of every false way. And it's worth giving and giving and giving some more to, because you really value this. Great, great lessons for us. You're subject to the invitation call of Jesus Christ. We hope that you'll learn the lessons, give your life to Jesus, and allow all of this to change you from within, so that this God who is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in loving kindness, will extend his mercy even to you. Now would be a good opportunity to receive all of that as we stand and sing Song of Invitation.